Developing a facility that's focused and built and designed around cancer patients and cancer therapy is the future of cancer. And we've dreamed of having such a building, and we're now building it.
This is the right time to build a cancer hospital because cancer is becoming much more common. It's affecting younger and younger patients, and we need the capacity to take care of those patients.
So the mission of the Dana-Farber has been clear from our inception to provide the very best cancer care. The construction of this cancer hospital, the only dedicated cancer hospital in New England, and the collaboration with Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center is really an extension of that mission.
We are tremendously complementary organizations. We're organizations that care deeply about the same things. But what we also share is an acknowledgement that the way that we have been doing things is not going to be enough for the future.
Sidney Farber, when he first started treating children with leukemia, developed this concept of total cancer care, bringing every specialist that is needed for the care of that patient to the patient's bedside. And that has been our aspiration throughout our history.
We're not just raising a building.
We're raising the standard of cancer care
For everyone.
Please welcome to the stage Media Relations Manager at Dana-Farber and our program's MC, Victoria Warren.
Thank you so much. Hello and welcome to the 2025 Dana-Farber Cancer Institute Presidential Symposium. A really exciting time to be here. I hope that video got you inspired about the future cancer hospital, which you will learn more about today. Thank you and for joining us. The Dana-Farber community is represented here today, from patients and caregivers to friends, faculty, and our dedicated philanthropic community. All of you are critical in making a positive difference in the lives of our patients and their families. This year's program, Shaping the Future of Cancer Care, Transforming Research, Care, Education, and Innovation, captures both the spirit of the progress you have enabled and the promise of what is to come. Throughout our time together today, you will hear from our pioneers in artificial intelligence, pediatric oncology, and basic and translational research. You will also get to hear from our next generation of superstars. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions and interact with one another and our faculty leaders, which we hope you will all take advantage of this afternoon. Before we begin our program, I just want to note the restrooms can be found by going right back outside into the lobby and taking a left. To begin the program today, I am pleased to welcome to the stage Dana-Farber's Chairman of the Board, Josh Bekenstein. Josh is a senior advisor of Bain Capital LP, one of the world's leading private multi-asset alternative investment firms based here in Boston. Josh helped start Bain Capital in 1984 with several colleagues from Bain & Company, the management consulting firm. Bain Capital LP has since grown to become one of the most successful and well-regarded private equity organizations in the world. Josh joined Dana-Farber's board in 1997 and has served as chairman of the board since 2011. Please welcome Josh Bekenstein.
I also have one real knee and one artificial knee now. 4.5 weeks into the artificial one, so hopefully be on the road on the PMC next summer. Anyway, thanks, Victoria. Welcome all to this annual Presidential Symposium. I want to recognize in the room a lot of my fellow trustees. We have Dana-Farber Society members, members of the PMC community, and our Jimmy Fund donor community. But most importantly, the true heroes of Dana-Farber are in this room, much of our faculty and staff, and I'd ask you all just to stand for a moment so we can thank you. So this is called the Presidential Symposium, and it's the first one. Ben had just been named president last year when we did it, but this is the first one when he's been our president. He's finished his first year as president, and I think we as a board couldn't be more excited about what Ben and the leadership team at Dana-Farber are doing. You're going to hear lots of exciting things today, but the conversation about the new cancer hospital has been an amazing effort, and we couldn't be more excited about what that means for our future. Today we're at a critical structure or juncture as cancer incidence continues to rise. Advances in research are moving faster than ever before, and we are launching at once a generational opportunity to build the region's first ever dedicated adult inpatient cancer hospital. Again, you saw stuff about it in the video, and it is very, very exciting for everyone at Dana-Farber and really for New England, and because of the research we do, for everyone in the world. I also want to talk a little bit about Ben. He is the Richard and Susan Smith Professor of Medicine at Harvard Medical School. But for those of you who don't know him, he's also a brilliant physician scientist who has spent his career focused on blood cancers. His laboratory has worked to define the pre-malignant states for blood cancers and to develop novel mechanisms for drug activity for cancer. Before becoming the president of Dana-Farber, he, for 8 years, was the chairman of medical oncology, which has 300 faculty members and more than 80 cancer research laboratories in it. He's earned countless awards, and we're not going to spend the whole afternoon going over those, and accolades because of his research. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Ben Ebert.
Thank you very much, Josh, and thank you, Josh, for being such a great partner in this past year. Welcome, everybody. This is such a great opportunity for all of our most loyal supporters and philanthropists to hear a little bit about what's going on at Dana-Farber, what the road ahead looks like, and get to know some of the people who are doing the work at Dana-Farber. As a sort of 30-second summary of the year, it's been a truly extraordinary year. We used the word existential threat in the last year more times by far than I'd used in the rest of my life, but it all worked out. So we have faced executive orders of various types, federal legislation. We faced threats to our research funding. We faced decreases in Medicaid funding, threats to Medicare funding. We faced market competition in a way that we've never seen before. And despite all that, I think we finished the year stronger than ever before. We saw more patients by far than ever before, continued our extraordinary increase in volume every single year, at least 3% greater new patients, 10% revenue growth almost every single year for many years has continued. Despite all those threats to research funding, the threats to our academic partners, Harvard Medical School, Harvard School of Public Health, we ended the year with more NIH grants than we've ever had before. A lot of it coming in September when a lot of grants had to get out the door before the end of the fiscal year. We had more grant funding in total than ever before and more breakthroughs in basic research, translational, clinical research than ever before. So thrilled about that. And in the midst of that, as we'll tell you about a bit today, we laid the groundwork for our future. We did an extraordinary amount of planning for our future cancer hospital, our new collaboration with Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital. We made a strategic plan as a roadmap for the coming years, so did an enormous amount of work to get us ready for the coming years. Realizing, looking at this slide, that when I go around these days, there's photographers around, and I don't make all these slides, and so I may have lost all credibility by having a turkey on my head in the photo, but hopefully I can maintain just a tiny bit of credibility. So in my first year here, I've had an opportunity to go all around Dana-Farber. Every department, not just research and clinical, but every administrative department. I've been to every clinical floor, every clinic, adult and pediatric, all the inpatient services, and all of our network sites around Massachusetts and southern New Hampshire. And that spirit of the Dana-Farber, the culture, the mission of Dana-Farber permeates every part, every corner of Dana-Farber. No matter what role you meet, people have when you meet them, they know that they are doing their part to support Dana-Farber and to decrease the burden of cancer. And it's just, I've never seen another organization that has that depth of culture and a more committed staff. So incredibly rewarding. Of course, I knew that for many years, but the breadth of that and the depth of that still was stunning to see. I was worried that the slide projector would keep me on the turkey on my head. Just wanted to recognize this ended a year ago, our last capital campaign, but it was a record-breaking, stunning campaign that raised $2.5 billion for Dana-Farber and for cancer research, 2.3 million independent gifts from 928,000 individual donors, and 24 new endowed positions at Dana-Farber, which will support our most senior investigators in perpetuity. So a really stunning campaign that laid the basis for what we'll do in the future. And another incredibly important part of our philanthropy is the Jimmy Fund events, our grassroots events. This includes the PanMass Challenge, the PMC Unpaved and Winter Cycle, the Jimmy Fund Walk, which was the PMC Unpaved was just on Saturday. The Jimmy Fund Walk was just on Sunday with over 9,000 walkers and a record-breaking over $9.5 million raised. It includes the Red Sox Jimmy Fund Radio Telethon that also broke a record this year, bringing all of Red Sox Nation together to support Dana-Farber. So these are just wonderful events that not only raise needed funds for our research and clinical care, but also just bring huge numbers of donors who give small amounts that really add to the community support of Dana-Farber and for all of our patients. So I'll talk till I'm blue in the face about how Dana-Farber's the best hospital you could find anywhere, but it's nice to have a little bit of outside validation of those views. Some come from various listings. The U.S. News and World Report listed Dana-Farber and the only hospital in the top 3 in the country for both pediatric and adult cancers. We had a visit this year from the Joint Commission. That's the organization that reviews hospitals. They spend 4 full days with us going through our clinical operation in extraordinary detail. We sailed through with flying colors. They were so impressed with the compassion that is built into every part of the organization, the quality and safety aspects that are built into every part of the organization, and identified areas where that Dana-Farber will be their exemplar at other organizations for how to do certain things. In the bottom right, you can see we were recognized with the magnet status. This is recognizing the highest level of nursing care. This was our 5th consecutive magnet status recognition, which is something only 2% of hospitals in the country are recognized with. And finally, there was a Joint Commission recognition on health equity, and this was our first time going through that, and we again were recognized with that seal of recognition for our efforts in health equity. I will also talk your ear off as long as you would like about how it's the best place to do research in the country. But again, nice to have a little bit of external validation. And this is one from an economist with the National Bureau of Economic Research at the Kennedy School, a guy named Amitabh Chandra. And he looked at where scientific output happens, at what countries, of course, the US, Europe, England, and China rising quickly. He did a really interesting analysis by looking at where people move around the country and around the world, you can tell by their productivity before and after moving that about 50 to 60% of any individual's research productivity could be attributed to their institution. And that is exactly how we think. We try so hard to create the conditions at Dana-Farber that allow our researchers to do the most innovative and groundbreaking work possible. He also did an analysis to correct for size of institution. So what is the research output per researcher? Because some universities are enormous compared to other institutions. And in that analysis, Dana-Farber had greater research output per researcher than any institution in the world, which is really stunning, followed by, yes. And that's, not just for cancer, it's for everything. So I think it really validates the environment that we have and, of course, the brilliant people who do research at Dana-Farber. So I'm just going to recognize a few other representative types of things that we're doing to give you a sense of the types of things that are going on at Dana-Farber. One was the Center for Targeted Protein Degradation. This is a type of drug activity that came out of a number of labs at Dana-Farber, including mine. And there are small molecules, drugs, that can act as a molecular glue, which is what this cartoon shows, that two proteins stick together only when there's this drug present. And that can result in the degradation or destruction of those proteins, some of which we didn't have a way of making a drug against in the past. And we knew a lot about this field. We wanted to make new drugs with it. We had a partnership with Deerfield, which is a venture capital and hedge fund company, and they put in about $80 million. We created a real drug discovery team at Dana-Farber that generated 2 thriving biotechs and 1 drug that went all the way through drug development, through IND, all the toxicity studies, all the medicinal chemistry, and is going straight into the clinic in the coming weeks, sponsored by a major pharmaceutical company that took over the leadership of that drug. So that is true drug development that happened at Dana-Farber in partnership with the private sector. Another example is something led by Alice Shaw, who will talk to us shortly, is the Center for RAS Therapeutics. RAS is one of the most commonly mutated genes in all of human malignancies. It is a target that for years to decades was considered an impossible target to make a drug against. Yet there's been huge breakthroughs in the chemistry that have enabled us to drug RAS. There's now around 20 drugs in clinical trials for RAS. Alice recognized that we have researchers throughout the institution working on RAS in different laboratories, some basic science, some translational. We have clinical researchers in all different diseases, some pancreas, lung, colon cancer, other leukemia, some in adult, some in pediatrics. And we could put those people together into one center and have a synergistic research endeavor where people could work together. The companies could recognize that if they have a RAS drug, this is the place to come to get all their correlative studies and to do the best clinical trials. And so that has been a fantastic success, attracting more research funding, more clinical trials, and enabling our research to do even more to target RAS. If you haven't seen it before, this is about the coolest thing I've seen all year. This is the Nurse Simulation Center, and I think there's one of the representative mannequins out in the lobby that you may have passed as a real person. These are mannequins that sweat, cry, cough. You can change the breath sounds in any lobe of the lung, all the heart sounds, murmurs. You can shock them. And then there's this control room you can see on the right, and the people who are training get observed. There's cameras all around so they can get corrected on what they don't do well. They can rehearse over and over. And this is just such an amazing modern way to train in medicine, to be able to do all the things that you normally do with a patient on a mannequin before actually doing it on a human. So that is truly amazing. And we're actually setting up a full-size, hard-walled inpatient room that is exactly like our future inpatient hospital, so they can train in what will be the real environment. Another great advance in our future planning is a proton therapy center. This has been an ambition of Dana-Farber for many, many years now. Some of you may have heard about it a decade ago, people talking about it, to have the ability to deliver proton therapy at Dana-Farber. In the intervening years, the technology has advanced enormously. When we were planning for it 8 years ago, we were talking about building a huge building just to support the infrastructure for the proton facility. Now, they're much smaller and more compact, and we can fit it on the Dana-Farber campus, which is way better for patient care. The advantage of proton therapy compared to other types of radiation therapy is that it's more specific and can spare other tissue from radiation damage. And this is particularly important for our children. If there's a child getting treated, for example, for brain cancer and is going to be cured of their disease, any of that radiation to the normal tissue will affect that child for the rest of their life, and being able to have more directed therapy will be an enormous advantage for those children. So this is something we've announced in the past couple weeks. We will be submitting our determination of need in the next few weeks, and we hope that this will go fast and could be open for business as soon as 2027. It's possible that a few of you have heard that we're going to build a cancer hospital, and we spent a lot of the year planning. This is coming along, has come so far since we last met a year ago. We made it through all of the regulatory steps at the city and state level. The state needed to approve 300 new beds, the determination of need, and that was an 18-month process and ended with a unanimous and enthusiastic approval of the hospital. The politicians at the city and the state level are incredibly supportive of this endeavor, and it really showed. The whole hearing was full of politicians giving their personal testimonies of the value and care at Dana-Farber. We also got city approval for the building, including the bridges that will connect our outpatient clinics to the inpatient hospital, and that will connect the inpatient hospital to the Beth Israel Deaconess, so we can connect inside to the emergency rooms, the ORs, and the rest of the West Campus at BI Deaconess. And you can see the gorgeous new rooms there in the back, the family area, and these have been, we've spent the whole year really optimizing all the aspects of those rooms and how we're going to take care of patients in them. Many of you have asked as well about the doctors at Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital who are going to be caring for patients with us. These are the surgeons, the radiologists, the pathologists, radiation oncologists who will be working with us. We've had a huge year of recruiting the most important senior levels of each of those teams, senior surgeons, senior radiation oncologists, pathologists, radiologists, and they are fantastic. Each of the people that have been recruited are national leaders, wonderful physicians, and really nice people who are going to be charismatic recruiters of additional physicians who are going to need to really staff the Beth Israel Deaconess to accommodate our volume. They're going to aim to be hiring on the order of 200 physicians, and they have raised major philanthropy to recruit those people. It also extends to other parts of Beth Israel Deaconess. An example is Hadeen Jaffe, who is the head of the Connor Center for Women's Health at the Brigham and has moved to be the chair of psychiatry at BI Deaconess. So there's the aura of our collaboration, I think, is extending to many other aspects of Beth Israel Deaconess. Within Dana-Farber, two of our major clinical departments, adult and pediatric oncology, have new chairs. Kim Stegmeyer started about 6 months ago as the chair of pediatric oncology. Alice Shaw is the chair of medical oncology. You absolutely could not find better people anywhere in the country or the world to hold these positions. They are amazing scientists, amazing physicians, wonderful leaders, and I just couldn't be more thrilled that they have both taken on these really important roles. And though, of course, these really are the very best people in the country, but it is notable these are the first time that we've had a female chair of either of these departments in this 75-plus history of Dana-Farber. So in terms of the challenges going forward, one of the major ones is actually volume. There's more and more patients getting cancer. The number of new cancer patients continues to increase. Our cancer patients continue to do better and better and continue to stay in our clinics for longer and longer, which is wonderful. And we are about to have a huge step function of taking on all of those medical oncology patients who are currently being treated at Beth Israel Deaconess. So capacity and making sure that we have enough docs, nurses, all the staff, ambulatory clinic space, inpatient clinic space is one of our major challenges. We face all the legislative challenges that I mentioned at the beginning, but I'm spending quite a lot of time with regular visits to Washington to try to make sure that our politicians understand the importance of cancer research and cancer care. So we've got some significant challenges, but plans all around. So finally, I just wanted to note that we spent a lot of time on a strategic plan this year and spanning all aspects of what happens at Dana-Farber. We have put that together into 4 pillars: world-changing science from fundamental discoveries to new standards of care, to continue our cutting-edge and compassionate care for patients and their family, from early diagnosis, during therapy, to survivorship. We've added a greater emphasis than we've had before on education. We think that we can do a great deal for education, whether it's fellows, residents, medical students, nurses, pharmacists, or any other health professionals, as well as for patients and their families. And we have a great plan for that. And then in the last column, making sure that we have the best people to do all of those. An example of the new initiatives in science is a major emphasis on artificial intelligence, and that'll come out in just a minute in our panel discussion. So I just wanted to finish with thanking you all for being here. We have incredible pride in the research and clinical care that we do at Dana-Farber, and it's so wonderful to share a little bit of that with you today. We've had an extraordinary 75 plus years of Dana-Farber history, and we're heading into a 60-year agreement with Ecclesiastical Deaconess with 20-year renewals, so it feels like almost a halfway point. We're looking back at that last 80 years and looking ahead to the next 80 years, which makes this really a generational opportunity to define how we're going to take care of patients for many decades to come, and we're thrilled to go on that journey with all of you. So thank you for your attention. So instead of doing questions, I'm going to ask our panelists to come up and they can answer questions. So we're going to have a panel with Alice Shaw, Kim Stegmeyer, and Ellie Van Allen, and I'm going to ask them to do their full introductions once they get on stage. It's like the long walk up after you win your Oscar. Thank you all for coming. These are incredibly accomplished faculty members, but I'm going to ask each of you just to quickly introduce yourself and your role at Dana-Farber. So, Ellie, I'll start with you.
Sure. So thanks for having me. My name is Ellie Van Allen. I'm the Chandra Noria Family Chair for AI and Cancer Research and the Chief of the Division of Population Sciences at Dana-Farber. I run a research lab focused on AI and cancer genomics, really across every possible situation.
Great. Alice.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see you. I'm Alice Shaw, and I'm the chair of the Department of Medical Oncology and also Chief of Strategic Partnerships here at the Farber.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Stegmeyer. I'm a pediatric oncologist and physician scientist. I'm the department chair of pediatric oncology here at Dana-Farber and also the David Nathan Professor of Pediatrics at Harvard Med School.
Fantastic. So I mentioned a minute ago that one major new initiative is thinking about artificial intelligence and how that will influence cancer research and the care of cancer patients. Ellie is a computer geek / physician scientist who is leading these efforts. And Ellie, could you tell us a little bit about how you see artificial intelligence changing cancer care?
Absolutely. So I think there's many ways, spanning everything from basic science, biological discoveries, through to clinical care. And it's impossible to cover all of them in detail in the context of a brief session. But what I thought I would do is actually use an example to illustrate where we've come from and where we think things are going. A few years ago, my lab developed an algorithm using AI to make discoveries about prostate cancer. We linked principles of AI with cancer genomics and what was known about biology. So what was known about, let's say, 4,000 to 5,000 genes. We combined all of this together, we steered it at this data, and we discovered something that had been previously unrecognized that included a novel drug target that's now being brought into phase 1 purely through what we called biologically informed AI. So that was a few years ago. And what's happening now is we've basically taken out the guts of the algorithm that we had previously made, and instead, to replace the notion of knowing a little bit about 4,000 genes, with knowing everything that's ever been known, written about, produced, or discovered across all of science and medicine throughout all of human history. And this idea of taking all prior knowledge in that sense then gets added on with so-called agents, where we can now also train the AI to autonomously, so all on its own, query within that space and also ask additional questions of other tools and other systems throughout what is available, and frankly, in the entire electronic universe. And so this creates many different kinds of unique opportunities. This so-called agentic reasoning, this idea that this AI can actually come up with ideas, piece together pieces of information humans could not, and span all of this knowledge, could help make new discoveries. And because we can deploy these kinds of technology into the electronic health record, it could be sort of constantly updating itself and autonomously changing the model weights and changing the way it thinks, for lack of a better way to put it, to make the most advanced recommendations for care. And so in total, what we're now doing that I sort of thought we could only maybe do a few years ago, but now it's already happening in our lab and in our community, is building and testing cancer research superintelligence. And that's something it's not just a buzzword, it's actually what's happening.
That's incredible. And literally changing by the month. It's stunning.
Moving fast.
So could you, just as a quick follow-up, talk about the ethical concerns, whether it's data privacy, bias, health equity?
Yeah, so absolutely. And with AI, with any new disruptive technology comes these kinds of concerns, and AI is probably the biggest version of that I've certainly experienced in my lifetime. And so to try to circumvent that and think carefully about that, when I first took on the division chief role in population sciences, one of the first groups I engaged with was the research ethics team at Dana-Farber, which is housed in my division. It's led by physician scientists, Goyo Abel and Andrew Hantel, and introduced to them the notion of AI, what was coming, and worked with them to develop what are now sort of nationally recognized ethics frameworks for how to introduce, study, and use AI in clinical care, and how to try to sort of circumvent some of these issues. The other thing I did early on that is still a work in progress and something that we're still looking for support for is engage with Chris Lathan, who I think is in here. I saw him earlier today, earlier this afternoon, about engaging with not just the patients and the patient data that we can collect from Dana-Farber proper, but also throughout the entire network, which could unlock tens, if not hundreds of thousands of patients and their experiences that represent really a broader swath of humanity that will make for less biased and more generalizable models, and also create mechanisms to deploy the AI far more equitably than we otherwise would be able to do.
Outstanding, thank you. And move to Alice. So Alice, cancer research is incredibly complex now, requires a lot of collaboration. You spent, in the midst of your incredible academic career, 5 years as an executive at Novartis doing leading translational cancer research. And now you have this role in strategic partnerships as well as being chair of medical oncology. How do you see the collaborations between Dana-Farber and the private sector for moving cancer research and therapies forward?
Yeah, thanks, Ben, for that question. I mean, I think it's pretty clear now that academics and industry, those academic industry collaborations are really crucial for cancer drug discovery and development. It's interesting, Ben, like when you and I were training, I think a number of years ago, industry and academia were somewhat in separate camps in a way. And of course, that's very much changed over the last, I would say, especially the last 5 to 10 years. And when I was at Novartis, we very often refer to drug development as a team sport. And actually, academics, including many of the Dana-Farber investigators, are key members of the team. I think these collaborations are so crucial. And in terms of where I think we've seen really sort of the productivity of those collaborations is really around clinical trials and actually learning from patients themselves. And here I think that clinical trials may be, for example, sponsored by industry, big pharma or biotech. But it's really us on the clinical side, on the academic side, who are running those trials and treating the patients and really understanding, I would say, fundamental questions about every new molecule that comes to the clinic. Is the molecule working the way it should? Is it really hitting the target as it was intended? What are all the side effects? And I would say, importantly, who are the patients who are really responding to this new therapy and who may not be responding and why? And then ultimately, why might patients become resistant? And those studies really require us to study specimens, tumor biopsies from patients, so really to learn from patients. And that's what I think on the academic side and what we've done really well at Dana-Farber, that's how we've really driven, I think, this field forward in terms of drug development, hand in hand with our industry partners. I would just add, though, Ben, that there are some areas that I've seen both while I was at Novartis, but also on the academic side, where I think industry maybe shies away from in terms of collaborations. And so certainly on the very early side, so for example, if you think about foundational research, really what's like basic pathogenic mechanisms of cancer, like what's really driving the cancer, and understanding those questions are really hard. And they take a long time, and I mean, could take decades. To find new targets, to really understand how they work. And so oftentimes, industry will shy away from that, and that's really led by us on the academic side. And then the second area I would say where I have felt industry shies away from, and I saw this firsthand at Novartis, is that even though you might have a beautiful target, it's perfectly validated in a particular type of cancer, if the cancer is viewed as not common enough, even rare or niche, industry will often shy away from that as well. And so that's where, again, I think Dana-Farber investigators have really stepped up, been able to really drive drug development, especially in these rare or understudied cancers. And I would also put in the category here pediatric cancers as well, where we often see industry shying away from that, such an important need for patients.
That's great. Thank you, Alice. So that's a perfect segue to Kim. So as Alice said, pediatric cancers are more rare. So what are your thoughts on the unique challenges for bringing innovative therapies to treat children?
Yeah. So thank you, Ben, for that question, and Alice for setting up really a nice question. I'm going to start. I'm going to take us back in time a little bit, back to the 1940s, where for children we didn't have cures, and that first discovery by Sidney Farber of a drug that targeted folate metabolism that took our patients with leukemia and really for the first time induced a complete remission for these children. And then we learned over the years how to combine multiple chemotherapy drugs that we call cytotoxic drugs, radiation, and surgery. And those cure rates continue to go up to somewhere close to 60% in the 70s, and now in the United States, around 85% in 2025, which is remarkable by using these old therapeutic approaches. More recently, our pediatric patients, particularly with childhood leukemia and neuroblastoma, have benefited from some of the newer targeted therapies and immunotherapies. But we have many patients where we just have not made progress recently. And so we have to talk about why and how do we make more progress going forward. So as Ben alluded to in his opening remarks, in pediatrics, there's always a balance between curing the cancer but minimizing the toxicity, because we want our patients to have the benefit of a long, normal, healthy adulthood. And so one area that we're doing this now, and we were thrilled in pediatric oncology with the announcement of a new proton center. And that's a great case where a therapy that we know can work for some of our patients, we can now switch from the prior therapy to proton therapy and minimize that long-term toxicity. So we're incredibly excited about that. In other areas, there's nice overlap between the targets that we see that drive childhood cancers and those that drive adult cancers. So we also highlighted today in Ben's comments the new RAS center. And so RAS is actually commonly mutated in childhood cancers. But one of the big challenges that we face is that pediatric cancers, while there's some overlap, they're not the same as adult cancers in many ways. So first, the types of cancers that we see are very different. So the most common cancer in adults, lung cancer, we see prostate cancer, breast cancer. We don't generally see these cancers in children. Leukemia is the most common cause. Brain cancer is the second most common. And while some of the targets are overlapping, we estimate that about half the targets, the changes in the genes that drive these cancers, are unique to childhood cancers. And that means we have to have dedicated efforts to targeting those particular molecular drivers, as we call them. And then thirdly, the childhood cancers don't have a lot of mutations. It's something that we've discovered over the years and discoveries led here at Dana-Farber. They tend to have what we call very simple genomes with few mutations. And what that has meant is that they have not been responsive to a whole class of drugs called immune checkpoint inhibitors, a type of immunotherapy that's been very active in the context of adult cancers. So what do we need to do to continue to make progress, getting back to Ben's original question? The first is we have to study pediatric cancers specifically. It's just not enough to study adult cancers. And this means understanding what makes these cancers tick, what are the targets, what do the targets interact with, and then really dedicated efforts to try to make drugs against those targets. And I can think of no better place than Dana-Farber to do this. We have experts in the cancers, experts in the targets, phenomenal chemists, phenomenal structural biologists, and really amazing immunotherapists focused on childhood cancers now. So incredibly excited about the progress we've made and the progress that I know we're going to continue to make.
Great. Thank you, Kim. So now I'm going to do a group question, and same question for everybody. I mentioned that education is an increasing priority for us, that we could be a trusted voice for cancer information around the world for patients, families, clinicians, researchers. And wanted to get your thoughts on that from each of your individual perspectives. So I'll go down the line, starting with Ellie.
Sure. So I think, as with any new technology when introduced, it requires education both for the providers. So whether it's doctors, nurses, pharmacists, everyone in between is going to need additional training on how to use these different tools, how to use them safely, and perhaps how to use them super effectively. And in fact, we've already seen in some pilots where some docs have been exposed to some ambient listening technologies that remove us from having to type on the keyboard and about everything that happens with patient care, and let us just listen to our patients and make eye contact and have that humanistic experience that we all signed up for when we decided we wanted to be in medicine in the first place. To do that well requires training, and that requires new ways of sort of engaging with folks to do that kind of education. In parallel, though, we also have to think about the patient community, because as I'm sure is true of almost everyone in this room, I certainly know in speaking with my parents, they're already using ChatGPT and typing in their symptoms about all sorts of things, and then calling me up with questions. And I'm going to be honest with you, this isn't like, don't stop Googling X, Y, and Z. Frankly, ChatGPT is actually not as bad as I thought it was going to be in certain circumstances, and it really stress tests the need for thinking about what education means in the context of these new technologies that are in everyone's hands, and how we at Dana-Farber can be at the forefront of what that means and how to actually dictate that for the entire community. What that really is going to entail is both training up all the current staff and scientists and everyone in between at Dana-Farber, but also recruiting new kinds of physicians and physician scientists who are eager to embrace this new challenge and take us into the future in this way.
Great. Alice?
Yeah, well, completely agree. I think education is such a huge priority for us at the Farber. As you saw, it was one of the 4 strategic pillars of the strategic plan. And actually, I would say that perhaps maybe one of the crown jewels I'd like to highlight, of course, is our Hematology Oncology Fellowship Program. We have a really long legacy in training physician scientists, cancer researchers, oncologists who have, we've had the most incredible alumni, 2 sitting right here, in fact, Ben and Ellie and many in the audience. So really incredible alumni, which I think is a sort of a testament to how strong that program is. And now in the context of forging this new clinical collaboration with the BI, I think we also have the opportunity to also now create, redefine how we envision optimally training that next generation of cancer researchers and oncologists. And I think it's going to be so important. As you heard, cancer care is only becoming more and more complicated, and I think this will be a really important time for us, I think, to really optimize sort of a comprehensive, multidimensional approach to how we train, again, this future generation.
Outstanding. Thanks. Kim?
So I completely agree with the comments from Ellie and Alice, certainly. I'm going to also pick up on some of Alice's comments and also just add, for those of us who do pediatric oncology, we really are teachers for parents and patients. And so I was thrilled when I learned that Dana-Farber was going to have really now a dedicated effort also around education of our patients, parents, and also, of course, our trainees. and broadly the Dana-Farber community. You know, pediatric oncology, I want to speak a little bit about the training of pediatric hematologist oncologists. We're a much smaller group of folks than medical oncology. And you know, I'm of course very biased because I trained in this program, but it really is, I would argue, a program like no other in the world in terms of its dedication to training the next generation of pediatric oncologists, physician researchers. And I have benefited greatly from this program. Really, my career is indebted to this program. You know, and we really build a family of mentors, mentees that then become mentors. And so, you know, Ben and I trained together in Todd Golub's lab, which, you know, again, Todd Golub trained here. And it's just a wonderful family of trainees and mentors. But our program, just to give you a sense, it's a long course. So, you know, when you start as a pediatric hematologist oncologist, the first year is very intensive, 100% clinical work. And then the subsequent 2 years incorporate research. It's about 80% research, 20% clinical. But there is no way in 2025 that someone is ready to lead a research program after only 2 years of training. And so one of the things that makes our program so special is this deep commitment to training people in terms of their research career. They really need a long runway. So for example, I trained in Todd's lab 5 years before I was ready to run my own lab. And what that means in that long runway is they need to be supported. They need to be supported, their salaries, their research, the mentoring. And our program is deeply committed to that. And we're so grateful, too, to some of the programs that have developed here at Dana-Farber. And you're going to hear about the Leuven Scholars, I think, later in the day today. That to me, these programs are treasures. They're some of the most coveted fellowships now in our program. And they're supporting the next generation, which really is the future of cancer research. So, you know, I'm just thrilled with where we are. And I looked at some numbers last night. This is astonishing. 68 of our pediatric hem-onc fellows who trained in our program are now division chiefs or department chairs across the world. 2 deans of medical schools, including the dean of Harvard's med school, and 5 are CEOs or presidents of institutions that are academic. It's really remarkable. So I feel very, very fortunate to have trained here and now be a part of this community going forward.
That's amazing. That really is a big part of the legacy of Dana-Farber is who we train. Just had a conversation an hour and a half ago with Tony Latai, who has been the director of the National Cancer Institute for 8 days now, and was spent 30 years at Dana-Farber, trained at Dana-Farber, and was faculty with us. So, you know, I think all of us went into oncology in some way to change the fields, we knew that the way cancer was treated when we trained wasn't the way we hoped it would be treated in the future, and it is a rapidly evolving field with tremendous opportunities. So I wanted to get your thoughts from each of you on what opportunities you see, what are some of the most exciting opportunities that you see, and what we're going to have to do to get there. Ellie.
So even though I'm supposed to talk about AI, it's actually, in my mind, it's a physical opportunity. And what I mean by that is I see the future cancer hospital as a once-in-a-career chance to embed within the guts and the walls of the whole building the future of technology and care delivery, and make it such that any patient who goes through this hospital will get the most cutting-edge tech applied to their care in the most innovative and exciting way. And this can mean many different things, everything from, you know, ambient sensors throughout infusion units to track patients for early signs of allergic reactions, to following patients in the hospital for all sorts of issues that could arise anytime someone is admitted, to embedding in various surgical pathology techniques to capture the sources of data needed to train the next generation of AI models. These are very hard things to bake in existing infrastructure, existing physical infrastructure. And when you have a chance to build something from nothing, you can dream of and implement anything. And that's what makes it so exciting.
Fantastic. Alice?
Yeah, I'm so much to be excited about now. I guess maybe I would to speak on the clinical care and the potential to really transform how we care for patients in the future. And this is because of this new collaboration that we have with the BI and building the Future Cancer Hospital, but because of the incredible work that we have and the collaborations that we have between our researchers and our clinicians. I think it's really a unique opportunity we have now to really meet the evolving needs of our patients, and at a time when the therapeutic landscapes are shifting very rapidly across many different cancer types. And I guess I would add 2 points to that, which is that I think to really capture those opportunities, I think this idea of the collaborations and really team science is just so important. And thank you, Ben, you highlighted the RAS Center, which I think has really allowed us to build a community to really nucleate all the expertise that we have in a certain area together. And I think it's not just complementary, it's really synergistic interactions now, which I think will really accelerate drug development for patients with RAS-altered cancers. But there are many other examples beyond that as well, right? We have centers at Dana-Farber focused on young patients who are developing, for example, colorectal cancer or lung cancer, and really trying to understand the biology, the distinct biology of these young onset cancers, the risk factors, for example, how to also care for these patients, not just in terms of bringing the most cutting-edge technologies, but also in terms of very distinct psychosocial needs and survivorship issues. So I think that idea of collaborating, working together is super important. And then the second thing I would say, and building on your comments, Kim, is we really need to, and I think medical oncology is really taking this very seriously, really nurture and protect our sort of this next generation of physician scientists and researchers and oncologists. I think this is a challenging time, right? We know about the cuts in research funding. I think it's posing a lot of challenges to our early investigators, and so I think we need to provide these early investigators just a lot of support and keep them focused really on the mission that we have.
That's great, thank you. Kim?
Yeah, so similarly, so many things to be excited about. I'm going to pick up a little on Alice's comments on what we call young people's cancers or adolescent young adult. This to me is a great opportunity for collaboration across pediatric oncology and medical oncology, and we've just really seen this grow. These are patients that sort of get caught between not being children, not being adults, fully independent in the community necessarily. And now together across pediatrics and adults, we're really working so collaboratively around the care of these patients. There are pediatric oncologists in the lymphoma group and the sarcoma group, in the brain tumor group, working hand in hand. And there's a special AYA lounge and a center around adolescent young adult care. And this really has been made possible by you all, by your support, which is amazing. So I think on the care side, I'm incredibly excited. For pediatrics, for children with cancer, to me, our goal has to be curing all of them. That needs to be the goal, and we need safer therapies. And so I'm incredibly optimistic about the future around new therapies for children with cancer. And you might say, why? Well, first, as you heard from Alice, who also worked on the industry side, these cancers are rare, and the pharmaceutical community generally is not going to tackle the targets against which we need drugs. But I think we can do that now in academics. And so, you say, well, why, Kim, why do you think that? I think first because we've learned so much about these cancers. We've learned about the targets. We've learned about the complexes that they form. And we have one example which was made possible in part by work from Dana-Farber, led by Scott Armstrong, which is the FDA approval of a drug called revumenib, which targets one of the very important targets in a number of childhood leukemias, which really is incredible. And Scott has now shown that particular drug is active in a number of subsets. And so that was many, many years of basic research across our community and drug development with now a new FDA approval. So I think we're going to be able to do this across new targets. And there are many reasons. One, you heard from Ellie about AI strategies. Those strategies can be applied to understanding the structure of proteins. And that's very useful information for making drugs against those proteins. Two, there are completely new strategies in chemistry, and Ben described the Targeted Protein Degradation Center. I think this is going to allow us to tackle a number of the targets that are very specific to childhood cancers that have been difficult to make drugs against. And then when we think about immunotherapy, we're learning more about what makes the pediatric immune system different from the adult. We can now characterize the targets on the surface of cancer cells and make ultimately new therapies against those, whether they be antibody or cellular therapies. So I think the sky's the limit. I think Dana-Farber is just the right place to do this, and I'm incredibly excited about what our future holds.
Excellent. Those are phenomenal answers. So we're up to the audience participation portion where you can ask some questions, and if it's an incredibly easy question, I'll answer it, and otherwise I'll give it to these guys to answer. So if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. Yeah.
Thanks. I find this incredibly interesting. I'd like to address education. First, a thank you all for exceptional presentation, very clearly presented and worth listening to, and proud of Dana-Farber. When it comes to AI, you put emphasis on education with the strategic plan. How do you use AI to change the way we educate, the programs in education, so that we can eliminate what's not needed and create new ways of making very clear to the human brain quickly how or what is needed for today's research and clinical treatment? And where you're starting from the ground with a new hospital, this would be fantastic.
I think that one's got your name on it.
Yes, so I couldn't agree more. In terms of the second part first, in terms of where the new, like as we discussed earlier, where the new hospital brings with it this opportunity to inject technological change and the use of AI for all sorts of things, including in educational opportunities. So you can imagine scenarios where there's models sort of following patients over time and providing the necessary educational cues about certain kinds of treatment that's coming up or interventions that are about to happen in a way that is most consumable by the patient, including even just seemingly things that are sometimes hard to do now or historically, but could be trivialized, like different languages or making things visual or verbal, depending on what patients prefer. And so even just those technologies, which effectively exist already, are the kinds of things that we mean when we say we can use AI for educational purposes in a new hospital environment. To your other question, so how could we use AI to streamline the education experience, let's say, of trainees that are upcoming? I think there's numerous ways. There's numerous ways. There's so many that the ones that come to mind are actually the ones that I've already anecdotally experienced with my 10-year-old in his Russian School of Math homework that we do on the weekends, which used to be a very tearful experience for both of us, and now you can prompt the agent to sort of walk the student through in a way that is tailored to their experience. And so just as we do that for 10-year-olds, so could we do for, I'm just in a hypothetical situation, like when I was a first-year fellow, a Dana-Farber fellow, and I was trying to figure out how to do a bone marrow biopsy in a patient. And I had never done one in residency before because in my residency program, that was never an opportunity. And the way I learned it was basically almost in an apprentice style. I had a very talented physician teaching me how to do it, luckily for me and the patient. But not everyone gets that, right? These kinds of tech make all of that accessible to everyone. And that is just one tiny little slice of an example of where AI tools can be used for direct educational purposes in the course of whether it's training, whether it's hospital care, and so on and so forth. And I think we're so early in this space, but it's so exciting to be at the forefront of it because we have a chance to define it all. So couldn't agree more with your sentiment.
Great question, great answer. Any other questions? Yeah.
Hi, thank you, Ellie. While we're on the topic of AI, the one issue that keeps cropping up in my mind is the data that is used to feed or are used to feed the AI and the quality of the data as it's curated. So the question is, if there's any institution that's going to have a robust, well-curated database certainly it would be Dana-Farber and working with Children's Hospital. But do you see there being any resistance to really digging into research based on AI, using the databases that you have? I mean, can you address that, and how are you going to deal with it going forward?
So this is a great question, and I think we have a great opportunity at Dana-Farber to stay at the forefront of this. I alluded to the goals and the works with Chris Lathan and the network hospitals, whereby we insert infrastructure to do data capture in the way we do it here, so that the AI models we're building can generalize to larger and larger sets of populations. There still are challenges and areas of risk related to patient privacy and other elements that we are frankly hoping to get more guidance from our friends in Washington on what the right way is to actually approach this. I actually had the privilege of presenting to the United States Senate on 2 different occasions about this exact topic. In 23 and 24, it was a bipartisan initiative led by a variety of senators, but most prominently Senators Rounds and Heinrich from South Dakota and Indiana, respectively, to really push for the need for guidance on what is going to be allowed and how are we going to be able to create and curate and disseminate these kinds of models to minimize risk of quality issues, of patient privacy and whatnot, but also maximize gain. I think that's still a work in progress, if I'm being perfectly honest, but we're best positioned to lead the way.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I can't let my husband be the only one on the floor. I'm so excited, impressed, and you've given us so much to think about. We all come with different areas of interest, and I have 2 that I'd like you to address. You have sort of, but I'd like you to talk about early detection and how you see your roles in furthering that. I know we have now got funding in this area. I just am curious about how AI, or however you want to address it. And the second is community. We've addressed that too a little bit, but we're not in a time where we thought we would be in 2025 in terms of inclusiveness. And certainly Dana-Farber is set up for it. We have an incredibly robust program, even on the trustee side. We're working on making partnerships in the communities around all of our centers. But I worry, I'm sure we all do, because funding is an issue, fear is an issue. How do we keep these programs as robust as we all know they need to be?
Those are good. Yeah, thank you. Those are great questions. Maybe I could start on the early detection at a sort of organizational level, and then welcome any other comments, and then the equity one. So early detection and interception is definitely one of the Institute's highest priorities. It was sort of embedded in that first column that we're not just an institution to take care of cancer, that we want to get better at identifying it early and treating it early where outcomes can be even better. We created the Centers for Early Detection and Interception, and that is thriving. It is a disseminated effort in the sense that there are investigators who focus on each different disease and the unique aspects of early detection for each one. There are actual clinical trials ongoing now for patients, or not even patients, but individuals who are at high risk with a pre-malignant state to prevent the development of a frank malignancy. And there are clinics for new assays for early detection, multi-cancer early detection tests. Betsy right here is leading that, and we'll can ask her, and she can tell you the details of that. Maybe I'll pause there and see if, yeah, Kim.
So a really great question also in the context of pediatric oncology. So when I trained, we thought that it was exceedingly rare that a childhood cancer had an inherited component. And now we know that at least 10% of pediatric cancers, those children have inherited a germline, what we call a germline predisposition to developing cancer. And that number is going to go up over time as we learn more about the genes that predispose children to cancer. And so this question about prevention and interception in that context is really also a terrific one. We have a growing clinic for children with germline risk of cancer, led by June Kamahara, and I've just been so impressed with the job she's doing in growing that clinic. And there, thinking about AI and AI strategies applied to radiographic images to try to pick up very small precancerous lesions or early cancerous lesions that we can then address, or additional new genomic tests. We talk about liquid biopsy and whether the ability to look in the blood at mutations, whether at some point that's going to be able to allow us to now intercept. We're not quite there yet, but it's something that's being studied in the context of trials. So I think a lot of exciting development also on the pediatric side in intercepting for children at high risk of developing cancer.
Does anybody want to start on the health equity, or I'm happy to start on that one too. So that remains access to care at Dana-Farber is incredibly important to us. We invest in mammography van and a van that goes around and does skin checks and other things, community navigators who help people who have less health literacy, understand the complexity of cancer care and come to Dana-Farber. And so it remains a major source of investment. It's a major reason that we have our network of sites around the state, because not everybody finds it easy to come into downtown Boston to get seen and to get their infusions, and so having that network around the state facilitates that. And while, as you say, maybe not where we expected to be right now, but I don't think that we've altered our ambitions in any way in that regard. Yep.
I'd like to comment just also a little bit in terms of pediatrics. We have one of the world's leaders in the study of social determinants of health and pediatric oncology and outcome. And Dr. Kiribona has been exploring material hardship and the impact on pediatric outcomes. And the data is very clear in the diseases she's studied, that children who are living in conditions of economic hardship, they don't have as good outcomes as children who are not living under those conditions. And a lot of investigation to try to understand what is that, what are the biological components, immune components, et cetera. And so that's a thriving program. We're very committed to that work, and a number of trainees who are also working closely with Kira to build that program out. So very, very important area. And for our pediatric patients, we know that impacts outcomes. So we have to intervene the same way that we would if a child had a mutation and match them to a targeted therapy. We have to figure out how to actually intervene in this really important access for our pediatric patients and outcome. So great question.
Great. Well, thank you for those questions. Thank you to the panelists. Nothing gives me more confidence for the future than talking to my brilliant colleagues here and hearing all of their exciting ideas and plans for the future. So thank you all.
Welcome back, everyone. If you could take your seats, we're going to start the second half of our program. I hope everyone has enjoyed this opportunity to connect with one another, and I know it probably did not seem like enough time, so I just want you to know you're going to have ample time to continue the conversation during the reception following the program. So as folks are taking their seat, I'm going to introduce the next segment of our program. It's the Dana-Farber Research Enterprise, our enduring legacy and funding landscape. Since the Institute's founding in 1947, a hallmark of our mission has been an unwavering commitment to bold scientific discovery. Basic science serves as the foundation for groundbreaking advancements that improve and extend the lives of patients everywhere. While we are mindful of the evolving funding landscape, our dedication to advancing basic science remains stronger than ever, as it is essential to shaping the future of cancer care. Here with us to share some reflections and insights into this important topic is award-winning scientist, Dr. Brad Bernstein. Dr. Bernstein is chair of cancer biology and the Richard and Nancy Lubin Family Chair at Dana-Farber. He is also the director of the Gene Regulation Observatory at the Broad Institute, a professor of cell biology and pathology at Harvard Medical School, and an investigator in Harvard's Ludwig Institute. Dr. Bernstein's research focuses on epigenetic gene regulation in stem cells and cancer, work that has earned him wide recognition and countless prestigious awards. Please join me in welcoming Brad to the stage.
All right. Thank you, Victoria, for the kind introduction, and thanks everyone for being here. It'd be hard to overstate the legacy of Dana-Farber's research. Fundamental advances at the Institute have transformed cancer treatment in many ways. In this first example, Institute scientists on the left were trying to understand signaling proteins that make cells grow in a laboratory. They identified a kinase that turned out to be a potent driver of leukemia. They teamed up with pharma and eventually developed the first targeted cancer therapy. It was a really big deal, made the cover of Time, and changed countless lives. And years of study by Gordon Freeman, in the middle here, to find molecular interactions that keep our immune system in check. His work was critical for the development of immunotherapy. And of course, Bill Kaelin's studies uncovered oxygen sensing mechanisms, leading to new therapies. I won't give you any more detail on that one. I've learned since coming to Dana-Farber, do not try to explain HIF signaling when Dr. Kaelin's in the room. So Big Pharma, of course, jumped onto the targeted immune therapies in a big way, given their applicability across so many cancer types that affect huge numbers of patients. But Dana-Farber's science is also critical, perhaps uniquely so, for the 30% of cancer cases that are considered rare, and so they don't attract the attention of pharma. As our science and understanding of biology and cancer progresses, we come across new opportunities in rare cancers. Pediatric low-grade gliomas strike 3,000 children each year in the US. Molecular findings on BRAF signaling by scientists in cancer biology and pediatric oncology departments proposed a new therapeutic strategy, which was then pushed forward passionately by a group of patients' families, PMC riders, and generous donors. And a therapy for those children was approved last year. It's really something worth celebrating. Research in my own lab seeks to understand how the DNA in our genome, which stretches like 6 feet end to end, could possibly fit inside of a tiny cell. We found this peculiar defect in a rare sarcoma that suggested a new therapeutic approach. So we teamed up with clinicians across the street for a trial, and I think we now have a new therapy. I hope you'll notice that in all of my examples, the clinical breakthroughs were driven by fundamental studies asking questions about our genes, proteins, and cells. Dana-Farber is a great place for that kind of work, and we're doing more and more of it. So we've doubled our staff. We've doubled our funding in 10 years to $700 million. Folks are writing a lot of grants. We're moving fast into trials. How do you fund all this? So as you can see in this chart, roughly 1/3 of Dana-Farber's research funding comes from federal grants. Thanks to many of you in this room, philanthropic funding is close, with 25% of the research is from philanthropy. Thank you. The remaining funding is from industry, from non-federal sources, think Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and also from this institute ISR support. Now, federal funding is particularly important for the early explorations, asking those fundamental questions about biology. In my research department, cancer biology, about 50% of our budget comes from the NIH. So our scientists are spending a lot of time writing grants. It's getting tougher and tougher. The pay line at the National Cancer Institute is now single digits. It's less than 1 in 10 grants are funded now. So, people are saying that grant review is looking more like this New Yorker cartoon. Is it just me, or are these review panels getting a whole lot tougher? Despite this, as you heard from Ben, Our Dana-Farber scientists continue to do extremely well with the NIH. It's a testament to the extraordinary caliber of our science. You might ask, why is cancer research so expensive? I think the simple answer is cancers are really complicated. To have a serious chance of tackling this disease, we have to understand tumors with painstaking detail. Their DNA, protein, the RNA molecules, their metabolism, how the cancer cells interact with the immune system. We need to identify the vulnerabilities of each cancer so we can develop therapies that exploit them. The good news is that we now have these technologies that can do this. We have tools that allow us to dissect the molecular makeup of cancer cells with the kind of precision that 10 years ago, we could only have dreamed of this. But it's expensive, and it requires stable funding so investigators can cross disciplines, dive deep, go all in on the most important questions. Remember, the big breakthroughs are rooted in many years of research, of work. So I would say one of our most important jobs as leadership is to make sure that our investigators and the key projects ongoing at the Institute have sustainable support. And sometimes this involves bridging gaps in NIH funding. It's not just the investigators and the experiments. There's a lot behind the scenes in terms of infrastructure, the buildings, the cores, the administration, the compute we heard about, compliance. It's all essential for what we do. These scientific teams, that infrastructure, they take a long time to build, and they really require continuous support so we can keep making these advances. I just want to finish a little bit here by highlighting maybe the most important part of our ecosystem is we have extraordinary scientists, extraordinary talent, and one of our other most important jobs is to pick out the great ones and keep recruiting them and bringing those minds to Dana-Farber and making sure they flourish. These are the folks we put our trust in for the future discoveries and for the future clinical breakthroughs. Just to highlight, on the right is Xin Gu, who's a superstar we recruited into our department last year to launch her own independent lab. She chose Dana-Farber over Stanford, over Princeton, over our major medical centers across town. Xin's research program studies how cells integrate stress, which is really relevant for us because actually cancer cells are under a lot of stress. Xin's in good shape. She's well-funded. She got a sort of a startup that we launched her lab with. There are these junior faculty awards that she's been doing very well in receiving, and she's getting support from philanthropy, thank you. And I think you'll hear more about her in coming years. Hari, on the left, is a creative genius in the department. His lab studies protein structure and uses AI to discover new drugs. Sometimes when Hari's not in the department, he's gone over to MIT to do quantum computing on the side because he's convinced we're on the cusp of bringing that into the Institute. Hari's been around for 7, 8 years now, so he's more senior than Xin. And that's actually a really tricky time in careers. He's no longer eligible for those foundations that will award the junior faculty, new faculty awards. So Hari's super dependent on NIH. Hari, a few months ago, got a perfect score on an Outstanding Investigator Award from the NIH. This is fabulous news, right? He got the grant, but incredibly, the NIH Institute funding him is making across-the-board 50% cuts to every single grant. That makes a big deal for Hari's program, so he is really hustling to make up the difference. He's writing a lot of grants. He's going to do fine, but it's taking a lot of his day-to-day time from science. And there's a lot of superstar faculty like this across the Institute. They're the ones that are going to make those breakthroughs, that are going to change cancer care down the road. They're writing a lot of grants. They understand that's the job, and they do it. But I would just say every dollar that comes from philanthropy means just a bit more time for the science and will ultimately impact cancer patients. So in conclusion, cancer is complicated. But I think it's a special time in history where we have these new powerful technologies and cross-disciplinary collaborations that are driving incredible breakthroughs. This research underpins those advances, new therapies, launching new biotechs, impacting our patients' lives. But it requires sustained support, and the federal landscape is complicated and a little scary sometimes these days. That said, I'm really optimistic about Dana-Farber. We have these extraordinary minds, we have this amazing scientific ecosystem, but also we have leadership. I've spent a lot of years at other institutions, and I know how special it is to have an institute president, trustees, and donors like yourselves who are so dedicated to our scientific mission, and it makes it a lot easier for me to do my job as chair. So thank you all. This brings me to my next job. I'm now honored to welcome Dana-Farber trustee Richard Lubin to the podium. Richard is senior advisor and the co-founder of Berkshire Partners. For over 3 decades, Richard has been a pillar of the Dana-Farber community, serving on the board of trustees, where he is now vice chair. Together with his wife Nancy, their partnership with the Institute combines business expertise, a commitment to the community, and a passion for advancing cancer research. I've been honored to serve as the Lubin family chair since I joined Dana-Farber almost 5 years ago, and this chair has accelerated the fundamental explorations of our genome that I touched on very briefly. In 2022, the Lubin Family Foundation established a Lubin Family Foundation Scholar Award, an incredibly successful program that provides mentoring and generous financial support to young investigators launching their careers. Please join me in welcoming Richard to the stage.
Well, you've just heard from Brad about the importance of Dana-Farber's research enterprise and the challenges and opportunities that are ahead of us there. I was asked to provide some background on the thinking behind our foundation's support for that research enterprise through the establishment of the Lubin Family Foundation Scholar Award program. Our foundation, by way of background, was established over 40 years ago, and medical research has been one of the primary areas of focus throughout our foundation's history. About a half a dozen years ago, we determined that we wanted to develop an oncology research-related program focused on the scientist rather than on the science. And in the course of looking at that, we conducted a series of interviews to hone that focus. I'll note now that we were fortunate in that process to have Dr. David Livingston become an integral part of our process. And as probably everybody in this room knows, David was an esteemed researcher and great mentor at Dana-Farber. The focus of our program as we came out of those interviews was to concentrate on physician scientists. We were convinced that researchers with that background were disproportionately responsible for producing great science, while they were also especially at risk, and that's maybe especially true in today's environment. We determined that we would focus on the approximately 4-year period between the end of their fellowship programs and when they achieved their own laboratory, and that is plus or minus 4 years. That's a period when pressures are, I think, extremely high with respect to staying on an academic research career path. So we focus on that period, and we decided to have a program that would provide support for 4 years and that it would be going to 4 scholars per year. Importantly, we also determined that the program should focus on providing an enhanced mentorship experience during that period. And again, David Livingston had a role here. It was his belief in the importance of mentorship that was a major factor in our program's focus there. Finally, in this regard, I'm happy to say that on July 1st of this year, our 4th cohort began receiving funding and otherwise participating. And so now our program is at steady state with 16 Lubin scholars in the program. Which takes me to my primary task today, which is the introduction of our next 2 speakers, both of whom have a close connection with the Lubin Family Foundation Scholar Award Program, Drs. Bill Kalin and Cindy Hahn. They will share with us how scientific discovery is funded across generations and career stages while shedding light on the challenges, pressures, and opportunities that come with seeking support for breakthrough science. Before they begin, I'll provide a little background on each of them. Dr. Bill Kalin is a Howard Hughes Medical Institute investigator, the Sidney Farber Professor of Medicine at Harvard Medical School, and a Dana-Farber faculty member. He received the 2019 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for his work revealing how cells sense and adapt to changes in oxygen availability, a mechanism that cancer cells can commandeer to fuel their growth. And, as important, to me anyway, Bill is the scientific director and much more of the Lubin Family Foundation Scholar Award Program. In point of fact, he was instrumental in its creation, and it wouldn't exist in its present form without him. Dr. Cindy Hahn is a physician scientist in the lymphoma division at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and an instructor of medicine at Harvard Medical School. She received her undergraduate degree from Amherst College, her MD, PhD from Dartmouth Medical School, trained in internal medicine at Brigham and Women's Hospital, and completed hematology and oncology fellowship at Dana-Farber and Mass General Brigham, where she served as chief fellow. She is currently a postdoctoral fellow in the laboratory of Dr. Catherine Wu and at the Dana-Farber and Broad Institute of Harvard and MIT. Cindy is a Lubin Family Foundation scholar, where she is a member of the program's first cohort and a recipient of the Alan J. Hirschfield Lymphoma Research Award, and has been recognized for her dedication to teaching and mentoring throughout her training. Her long-term goal as physician scientist is to lead an independent laboratory that aims to identify new ways to enhance immunologic targeting of lymphomas and improve therapies for patients. I'd like to now invite Bill and Cindy to the stage.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Richard. I see a lot of familiar faces here, but for those of you who don't know me, I came to the Dana-Farber in 1987 as a medical oncology fellow. I came because it was the best medical oncology fellowship training program in the world. That was true then. It's still true now. And there's a long history of people coming to train here as fellows and then joining the faculty eventually. So it's been a good farm system for us. Now, in my case, I came to the Dana-Farber largely because of its clinical excellence. I expected to be a clinical investigator, but fortunately for me, as a fellow, the great David Livingston, who you just heard about, took me under his wing and taught me how to be a physician scientist. And so, much to my surprise, I took the road of becoming a physician scientist. And shortly after I started my own laboratory in 1992, a gene was isolated that, when inherited in defective form from mom or dad, causes a variety of cancers, including kidney cancer, which is one of the 10 most common cancers in the country. But in addition, a number of other cancers that all had in common that they produced the molecular distress signals that you or I would start producing if we went to the top of Mount Everest. And so that was sort of the clue that my clinical training was saying these tumors are behaving in an odd way. There must be something related to oxygen. And if I can use the tools David Livingstone taught me, maybe I could understand for the first time how oxygen gets sensed. And so the relevant work was done between the year 1993 and the year 2000. Now I'm going to cheat here because they haven't started the clock. I could have just left it off the entire time, but that would not be fair. So can we make sure that the clock gets started? So the relevant work was done between the year 1993 and the year 2000. And then, as you heard, I was fortunate enough to win the Nobel Prize in 2019. Now, this is Nobel Prize week. I can tell you if there was a Nobel Prize for mentorship, David Livingstone would have won it. So now, I started out by saying I came here for clinical excellence, but I think part of the secret sauce of the Dana-Farber is, that we pay equal attention to research excellence, meaning laboratory-based fundamental research, as you just heard from Brad, and clinical excellence, whether it's clinical research or clinical care. And so it was that environment that allowed me to thrive as a physician scientist. But I've also come to appreciate, and admittedly I'm biased, but you just heard it as well from Richard, I think physician scientists have a special role in that ecosystem because they're the natural bridges between the world of the clinic and the world of the laboratory. They understand the language well, and they see the opportunities. And so I think that was largely why the Lubin family decided to focus on physician scientists. We want some of our best and brightest to go into that path to become physician scientists, but almost by definition, our best and brightest often have many, many, many opportunities before them, and I can tell you some appear more lucrative and less arduous than seeking the rigorous training that it takes to become a physician scientist. So now I've tried to introduce some of the ingredients that I think are important. You have to have a strong ecosystem. We have that. We have great substrate, great young people, but they need mentorship. A lot of becoming a scientist is taught by apprenticeship, and so they need mentorship, and frankly, they need some financial stability. So I think that was the genius of Richard and his family to create this program with the late David Livingstone. And it's now my privilege to introduce one of our scholars, Cindy Hahn. Cindy, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what this program has meant.
Yeah, so thanks, Bill. I'm a lymphoma physician scientist, and I split my time between caring for lymphoma patients in the clinic and being a postdoc in the laboratory of Catherine Wu. My specific project has really focused on how do we understand basic mechanisms in how lymphoma cells hide from recognition from the immune system. And I think Bill talked a little bit about what a special career being a physician scientist is. And you heard a little bit about my background in training. Well, one piece, and I think some of the inspiration for why I pursued this path to begin with, was early exposure to excellent mentorship when I worked as a research associate at Dana-Farber in Todd Golub lab and Kimberly Stegmeier's lab. And so this was really an inspiration, and through their example, I saw what an impactful career this could really be. And I was fortunate enough to then come back to Dana-Farber to be a part of the Hematology and Oncology Fellowship Program. And through that, I would like to highlight some of the special features of what being a Lubin Scholar has really meant to me. One of the main features I think that has been really emphasized is its commitment to mentorship. And through this program, I think my relationship with my primary mentor, Kathy, has been strengthened and structured. I've had exposure to many other mentors and incredible faculty here at Dana-Farber. And Bill now has to give me feedback on my presentations. So I feel fortunate to have this network of people around me. And I think one unexpected thing as far as mentorship is concerned is the peer-to-peer mentorship. I'm incredibly close to my other Lubin scholars. The four of us that started in this program, we have helped each other tremendously when we're applying for grants or thinking about taking the next steps in applying for faculty positions. And I know that I don't think I would be at this point without this program and my cohort of Lubin scholars. I think when I started this journey, I don't fully appreciated how challenging this last step would be. There's so many pushes and pulls from financial, trying to maintain enough support to actually be able to focus on your science, to be a good clinician and actually take care of my patients. Many of us are starting families. I had 2 kids during my postdoc. But really, it's this commitment, and I think the commitment of this program that has enabled me really to be successful in where I am today. And I feel very fortunate that I was just given an NIH grant that will transition me to my faculty position in the future. And I don't think that would have been possible without being a Lubin Scholar.
Well, it will come as no surprise hearing those remarks that this is an extremely competitive program. In fact, Brad and I sit on the selection committee, so almost by definition, the people we attract to the Dana-Farber are A's, and then we have to pull out the A+s who are going to then be in this program, and Cindy is certainly an A+. And so many of the things you said resonate with me. I think one of the many reasons David should have gotten the Nobel Prize in mentorship is he, about every 6 months, had to talk me out of quitting. And it was usually because this is too hard. My grant just got rejected. No one believes in me. I've run out of money. All these little things, but they're not so little when you're starting your career, especially again when you see other opportunities calling off in the distance that might seem easier at the time and even more lucrative at the time. So to have that validation of having a group of faculty say, we believe in you, I'm sure you would agree, it gives you a little bit of extra wind in your sail, knowing that you have a safety net underneath you in terms of some financial support. I will tell you, I've said before, it takes a village to raise a child, but also it takes a village to raise a Nobel laureate. And as I was on the stage, waiting for the king to give me the medal, I was thinking, how lucky am I? And I was just running through my Rolodex of all the ways I was lucky, but one of which was all of the donors who I, in many cases, will have never met, who were precisely the people who made sure I had the infrastructure to do my work, or when I perhaps had run out of funding, I got that little bridge loan, if you will, to keep the work moving forward. So thank you for all of you for the things you've done. And perhaps I'll end with 2 David Livingstonisms. One of which was, he used to call me Billy. He was, other than my immediate family, no one else was allowed to call me Billy, but he could call me Billy. He'd say, Billy, this is actually not that complicated. You just take a great young person, you plant them in a fertile area, and then you water them now and then. And that's kind of it. And in broad strokes, I think he's right. I learned scientific taste and instincts from him, trying to make sure people are working in good areas. But of course, the watering is a metaphor for, if you don't have the resources, you can't do the work. I've also realized that the Dana-Farber has established this virtuous circle. You've heard a little bit about it from Brad Bernstein, that because we're a great institution, we attract great young people like Cindy, but in the end, it's people like Cindy who make it a great institution. So if we can keep that flywheel going, we're doing okay. And perhaps my last David Livingston is David used to always say, Billy, it's the obligation of every scientist to train at least one scientist who is better than they are. So I'm so thrilled to have the honor of serving as the scientific director for the Lubin Family Scholars, because I think now you have a little bit of a taste of the caliber of individual that we're trying to support. So again, I want to thank all of you for being here. Thank all of you for your support of the Dana-Farber. I sometimes am struck by the fact that I was a child of the 60s and 70s when there was the constant drumbeat that scientists and engineers were our heroes. And I sometimes question, if I had not heard that drumbeat when I was a young person, would I have become a scientist? So on top of all of the other intrinsic difficulties of becoming a scientist, getting the grant funded, getting the training, Cindy, I'm sure this is something your colleagues talk about in terms of, let's make sure we don't lose sight of what's really important. And every day we walk through the waiting areas at the Dana-Farber, of course, we're reminded what's really important. But I know I've had to have pep rallies, so to speak, with my trainees to say, remember, you're the heroes. You're the good guys in this story. But I don't know if you want to close with any reflections on your colleagues and what they're going through now and how meaningful, again, something like the Lubin Scholar Award is.
Just to say that, it's been commented today that we're entering a tough time, and we are so grateful for the support. And it's just so critical in this moment, so thank you.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you all. Thank you. All right, thank you. Thank you.
And another thank you to Bill and Cindy, and also to Richard and Brad. Want to thank, yes. Their talk reminds us of the power of Dana-Farber's research, and it inspires us and supports our next generation of brilliant minds. Now, for the final segment of today's program, I would like to welcome to the stage business columnist and associate editor at the Boston Globe and the host of Globe Opinion podcast, Say More, Shirley Leung. For more than a decade, Shirley has been writing on the intersection of business and politics, as well as gender and diversity issues in the workplace. Shirley has won awards from the Society for Advancing Business Editing and Writing, and has been featured on Boston Magazine's list of 100 most influential people. She has also been a 4-time finalist for the Gerald Loeb Award for Commentary. But today, Shirley is here to share something far more personal, her own experience with cancer, which she opened up about this past May in her podcast series, The C Word, Stories of Cancer. Shirley will be joined by her oncologist, Dr. Ann Partridge. Dr. Partridge is the vice chair of medical oncology and co-founder and director of the program for young adults with breast cancer at Dana-Farber. A professor at Harvard Medical School, Dr. Partridge holds the Eric P. Weiner Chair in Breast Cancer Research at Dana-Farber. She conducts clinical research focused on improving cancer care and outcomes with a particular focus on young adults with breast cancer. Dr. Partridge has won countless prestigious awards for her work, including the Champions of Change Award from the White House. While Shirley and Dr. Partridge make their way to the stage, we're going to play a brief video that introduces you to Shirley's story.
I'm going to say it, the C word. Are you ready? Cancer. When I was 12, my mom's mom, my waipa, she died of cancer. I watched my chubby, cheap grandmother waste away after chemotherapy and a double mastectomy. She didn't have the advantage of early detection in the 1970s. She found the lump herself, and by then, the cancer had spread. Waipa was only 55 when she passed away in 1984. She had fled Mao Zedong's communist China, but she couldn't outrun cancer. That's why when I was diagnosed, it felt like I'd been waiting for it my entire life. For now, I'm fully cured, but in some ways, I'll never get over cancer. For the next month on Say More, we'll be sharing stories of cancer, starting with my own.
Hi. Hi, I'm not used to being on this side, being interviewed.
Yep.
I'm nervous.
Tables are turned.
I'm nervous. Be gentle, please.
I'll be kind. As the audience heard, you're an incredibly accomplished journalist. But then about 8 years ago, your life changed. Can you tell us about your journey?
So I was about 45 years old. My kids were 4 and 6. I had a really busy life as a columnist at the Globe. And I went in for a routine mammogram. And because of my waipa, my grandmother had died of breast cancer, I was one of these people, I could not wait until I was 40 and I could get my mammogram. I was so excited. So around my birthday, I always got my mammogram, just around then. And so I get the mammogram, and then I get a call back. And a lot of women, they have dense breasts. So I'm thinking, oh, no big deal. They're just calling you back. And then I go back, and then they said, we need to biopsy you. At that point, I started to worry a little bit. I tried to not think about it, and I still remember the time I got the call. I I found out. I was, at the time, the Globe, many of you might remember, we were at Morrissey Boulevard in Dorchester. We've been there for like 50 years, and that was the week that we were moving downtown. So I'm sitting in this empty newsroom, half the people are Morrissey, half the people are moving, and I'm on deadline writing about the red line, and I get a call from the doctor's office. I'm thinking, this is good. They're calling me. Nobody would ever tell you have cancer over the phone. This is really good. But no, guess what, Anne? You do get called. They do tell you have cancer over the phone. It's not like the movies or TVs. But what was like the movies or TVs was that once the doctor, the nurse, or the other line says cancer, your world just stops. I mean, the room starts to spin, and you don't even really know what is being said on the other line.
Yes, I'm sure that's true. So tell me, how did you end up at Dana-Farber?
So it was actually quite scary when they tell you have cancer, and then you feel, at the time I was getting my mammograms at Boston Medical Center. I was living in the South End, so I just walked to the mammogram center there. And you felt like you're just kind of left on your own. Okay, you have cancer, now go figure it out. And luckily in Boston, I have my best friend is a doctor, so she could walk me through. It's like, I know someone, Dana, here's the number, you can call it Dana. Another friend had also had breast cancer, same kind, and she said, here's my surgeon, Dr. Golshan at the time at Brigham. And so I had an easy path in that I had people who knew people, and it was within a week, I had my initial doctor set up, and then I got introduced to you from Dr. Golshan. Actually, I think it might have been Kelly Tuthill who introduced me to you. So Kelly is a well-known TV journalist at the time from WCVB, and she told her story about cancer on TV. And so I reached out to her, being in the business, and she suggested I reach out to Anne because your specialty is working with women on the younger side with breast cancer.
And you know that you were diagnosed, fortunately, very early, and we've talked a lot today about early detection, and it was picked up on a mammogram, even though it sounds hard to hear it on the phone, I'm sure. We try to detect cancers early, and we think, of course, we know that's better for outcomes, but it's no less impactful for any given individual, and it changes your life. Can you tell us a little bit about your treatment experience and how that altered the way you were viewing things?
I want to say one more thing about mammograms and early detection. I didn't know this until I got my particular breast cancer, which is DCIS, which you call treatable and beatable. And it is. But as a women were taught you should do self-exams, right? Or at least growing up, I don't know if they still do, but self-exams, look for the lump, feel something. And I didn't realize that the kind of cancer I had, you would never feel it, right? You would never, ever feel it. It's like no one has ever told me that you could get a cancer that you can't feel. And so mammogram truly saved my life, and so I'm getting the mammogram, and I'm going through treatment. I did two I guess I went to see two doctors. I went to see a set at Dana-Farber, and I went to see a set at MGH. And I ended up, we're lucky in Boston, right? Two really great institutions. But I end up picking Dana-Farber because this is your specialty. This is what you do. And so I wanted to go to a place where this is what they're known for, cancer treatment. And I just remember walking the first time into Dana-Farber. We talked about in the podcast being, it was like the Four Seasons, the Four Seasons of hospitals. It was just, so calm and welcoming. It wasn't like any other hospital I've been to. I love the healing garden, and it just felt, if you were going to get cancer, this is the place you want to be. And you felt like when you walked the first time I walked in the lobby, I felt like, we talk about cancer, the war on cancer, and you felt like this is the place to be. These are the people who are in the trenches and will be in the trenches with you and fight cancer alongside with you. So I just felt like it was just a very magical place just walking into Dana.
You know, it's so to reflect on the experience of your grandmother and kind of, you know, did she have a team working with her, fighting the cancer with her, and then you coming forward many, many years later to be able to, you know, go to different institutions and come up with a team that worked just right for you? That must have felt at least empowering.
It did, and you know, when I remember talking to my mother a little bit about my grandmother's experience, and I was 12 at the time, so you know, I'm just learning more about it. And my mom was saying that my grandmother at the time, she was newly immigrated to the US, and she probably had the breast cancer, or she didn't go to the doctor probably as often as she could have or should have, and she might have let that grow, you know, because she's like, oh, it's nothing. And then by the time that she went to see the doctor, it was too late and it had spread, you know. And it was tough to see my grandmother die of breast cancer. And for the longest time, I thought, even before my own diagnosis, I kept on worrying about that I would someday have breast cancer and die. And even when I got my diagnosis, and even though it was very treatable, I still felt, it took me years before I could feel like I could talk about cancer and I wasn't going to die from it, just because we're conditioned that, you know, cancer is deadly and you're going to die and everyone's going to die, or eventually.
C word.
Right, it's the C word. You shouldn't talk about it. And so, and I just remember how difficult it was to tell my mother I had cancer, you know, because her mother had died of breast cancer. And I just remember, my mom lives in California, so I could actually avoid the topic for weeks, not talk to her about that I had breast cancer. And you know, people have asked me, was it hard to tell your kids? You know, my kids are 4 and 6. They don't know what cancer is. So it wasn't difficult to tell my kids. But my mom was a completely different story. And, you know, and I remember it just kind of came out. We were on a phone call. She's in California, and she was making summer plans. And I finally just said, listen, we cannot make any vacation plans this summer because I have cancer. And we just started crying, you know, and we were both very emotional. And I only, through doing this podcast, I only asked her later, it's like, did you think I was gonna die like my grandmother, like White Paw? And she said, no, because the treatments are so advanced now. I knew you were not going to die. She felt bad that I would have to have a mastectomy to deal with I had a lot of DCIS, 2 biopsies. It didn't spread, but I had to have a mastectomy and then 5 years of tamoxifen. Actually, I'm supposed to bring up the mastectomy, right?
If you want to.
I do, because imagine they tell you, you know, this is a very treatable, beatable cancer, but we need to take your breast. And you're like, really? What can be done? Probably, you know, and I do appreciate that over time, doctors have become much better at, it's not one size fit all, right? Become much better, you know, at treating the patient and making sure you're killing the disease, but leaving a quality of life for patients. But do you think there'll come a time where we don't have to have mastectomies?
I knew she was going to turn the tables and start interviewing me. I knew this was going to happen. No, I do think that there will be a time that we can not operate on some people with breast cancer, as we increasingly understand for diseases like breast cancer, and already for diseases like thyroid and prostate, many can be left in place and have a kind of watch and wait approach, or active monitoring is what we call it. And we're actually studying that for DCIS right now, although the data are not all in. And so the most conservative, safest thing to do right now is to have the surgery that you underwent. But it does leave both scars literally and figuratively for people.
I mean, and the other thing that for me, even though, you know, I think my whole treatment from beginning to end was about 6 months, right? Had the mastectomy, well, not including drugs, but mastectomy, and then the reconstruction, right? And then tamoxifen for 5 years. And but the mental impact of having cancer lasted for years. I mean, that's why it took me 8 years to really
talk about it publicly. 8 years for me to finally wear pink on, during Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And also 8 years for you to interview me, right? I think
that's right.
So on stage.
and tell us about that. You did wait 8 years. Why all of a sudden did you decide to go public with your story?
I mean, I actually did one interview. I'd done one podcast interview with another about cancer. And actually Barrett Rollins, if he's still here, he was also part of the series as well. Barrett also was a great guest on the podcast series. But I'd been doing a series of interviews about cancer, and I decided, you know what, I need to talk about my own cancer as well. But I also waited too because, I didn't present as a cancer patient or the kind that we think of. I didn't go through chemo. I didn't lose my hair. I didn't think of myself as a warrior. I didn't think of myself as a survivor. And so I kept on thinking, is it okay is it okay that I describe myself as a cancer patient or having cancer? And so that's why I waited. And the reason why I did want to talk about, because through working on the podcast, I realized, because of the great work that you've done and so many scientists at Dana-Farber and researchers and doctors, that a lot of us are living, have survived cancer. Like, more of us are living, and we're living normal lives because of all the treatments and early detection. So we've got to find a way to give voice to us, those who have had cancer, but we didn't have a near-death experience. But we are affected by it mentally, but also I worry about, am I prone to more other cancers? Having had cancers, it raises a whole new concerns, right? Will I develop another kind of cancer? For example, immediately after being treated for breast cancer, said, guess what? You need to get a colonoscopy now, early, ahead of schedule, because having breast cancer makes you more, susceptible or more likely that you might have a higher incidence of colorectal cancer. So I was like, great. And so now I'm thinking, like, well, what other cancer will be, coming down the line for me? And so I'm hoping that, there's more research on that, or more discussion of that, just make people more comfortable talking about having had cancer.
Yeah, it brings you a heightened vulnerability and sense of your own, this can happen to me because it did.
Right,
it changes the way you view, I think, yourself, your health, and things like that, as people tell me.
So Anne, can I ask you a couple questions too? I just can't help myself.
Sure, sure.
So Anne was on my podcast, and it was great to connect with her. And I wanted you to tell the story of why, how you got into studying women, young women with cancer. I mean, I didn't quite appreciate it back then, but I do now. I mean, you're a real pioneer in this field. I mean, you've been doing this for probably 3 decades, right? At a time when nobody was really thinking about how to treat young women, how young women have different concerns, right, from everyone else. And I found this in my own reporting too. I would meet young women, late 20s, newly married, pretty serious diagnosis, stage 3. And they're not thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about whether they will live. They're thinking about, can I have a baby and can I breastfeed? I mean, that's extraordinary. And that is what you've dedicated your career to help women do that. So talk a little bit about how you got into.
We want to hear from Shirley, but I will answer her question out of this second. No, so early on, we've noted, and you heard about this earlier from Kim Stegmeyer, young adults are actually a growing population of our cancer patients and survivors. Our scientists, both at the Dana-Farber and the School of Public Health and around the world, are trying to understand that phenomenon, why we're seeing a growing number of young adults get diagnosed with tumors, including breast cancer. But now, almost 3 decades ago, I recognized, along with my mentors, being one of the kind of seed in the right soil at Dana-Farber as a fellow, that the young women were facing different issues, and they were pulling on our heartstrings a bit more, and they were getting more aggressive breast cancer that was harder to fight and combat and allow them to live, long, healthy lives. And so we had the benefit of support to develop both a clinical program as well as a research program to learn more about them. And we started cohorts to learn from every patient so that we could then use what we learned in our clinical program and collaborate with scientists and other researchers around the Institute and around the world so that we could learn more for this relatively rare population that had real disparities in terms of how they do. And one of the biggest things that we were a part of was studying whether it was safe to have babies after breast cancer, which there had been concern about that. And the good news is, it is. So babies are born. We get to count babies as part of our research.
Oh, wow.
So fun.
That's great. That's great.
So it's great. But let's get back to you. Can we get back to you?
No.
I'm going to take over again. And you commented on coming out with your, coming out, that's a funny thing to say, going public with your diagnosis. And I'm more curious, and I know there are a number of cancer survivors in the audience, both faculty, staff, as well as our guests. And my question for you is, did you have any really surprising or funny reactions from especially the public, right? Because you're a very public person.
Funny, not too many funny ones, but I was struck by, I'd waited a long time to tell my own story because I felt like, well, I don't feel like I really had cancer, or I don't feel like I should be in that space. And a lot of people wrote in and said, you know what, my experience was just like yours. Whether it's lung cancer or breast cancer, I didn't fit the mold or the mold of a typical cancer patient, and so am I okay to talk about it? Because I didn't, I didn't lose my hair, I didn't go through chemo. And if you think about it, it's incredible progress we made, that not every, that because of early detection, it got caught early, it didn't spread, so I didn't need chemo. That's good, and so there's a huge category of us like that. And I was thinking when we were doing our interview, I think this got cut out of the podcast because I all along was thinking like, oh, poor Anne, all her patients died because you're a cancer doctor, but that you're telling me, no, actually many of my patients live.
Vast majority.
The vast majority live, and you forget that, right? Because when you think of cancer, you think an automatic death sentence. And then it made me change, it changed my view of your work. It's not so much literally saving lives, it's more you're giving them an incredible quality, you're giving their life back. And you're making sure that you're preserving their quality of life. It's not, it goes way beyond saving, that's almost a given, they will live. It's more the quality of their life now. And that's exactly where you want to be, right, in this war on cancer. The other thing that I was struck by was people saying that, thank you for this series, because these were people who did not have cancer, but they had maybe a family member who had cancer, and or they were a caregiver, and they were saying, but they were saying a lot of people didn't know how to talk to, they didn't know how to talk to someone who has cancer, and so they felt the podcast gave people insight into what people were going through, and they knew what to say or what to do. And I thought that was really interesting because I think a lot of times because it's such a taboo topic, nobody wants to talk about it, or sometimes they don't acknowledge it, right? And so, so I felt like it gave people more insight into just more comfort and ease talking about cancer.
Oh, that's great, and clearly you have. I'm interested in your thoughts on, it sounds like you felt like you were kind of helping to build a community of survivors, regardless of the level or seriousness of their cancer. They're all serious, of course, and to help people find an outlet for that. Did you interview other cancer survivors as part of your podcast, or what other stories have people told you?
I did, and what I found was really interesting. You specialize in young women with breast cancer, and now we know there's a lot of younger people with colorectal cancer, and so one of the
people I talked to as a survivor, same thing, same story. Early 20s, colorectal cancer, and it took her months to get diagnosed because no one thinks when you're 28 that you're pregnant, you're a little bleeding in your blood in the stool, and they think, oh, it's just pregnancy, has nothing to do, it's nothing serious. And it took her months to know that she had stage 3 colorectal cancer. And she got really great treatment and was really saved by very innovative immunotherapy, and she didn't have to go through. This is weird. Do people have colonoscopy? Do they have to have colorectal cancer? Sometimes what do you call it? They have to. It's a pretty.
Sometimes they have a colostomy.
Yes.
They have to.
Right. It's a very.
It's a hard thing to live with.
It's a hard thing to live with, but she didn't have to do any of that, And so she wanted to. She was fairly young. She wanted more kids, and so they were able to preserve her ability to have kids. And so I think when I talked to her, she was literally a week away from delivering her 3rd kid. So, and she was 5 years out. And so I was excited to hear from people who their lives have been saved and preserved by really innovative therapies.
Yeah, I know you were on a panel last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago with my colleague Kimmy Ng.
Yes, another rock star. She was founding director of one of the early onset colorectal cancer centers, one of the first in the world, maybe the second in the world. And one of the things that struck me about that panel that we were on together, this was all about young people under 55 getting cancer. And it's really striking how many more, all different kinds of cancer. And one of the things that it struck me sitting on that panel and moderating it was the idea that we often think about cancer, that whether we get cancer, who gets cancer or doesn't get cancer, it's luck, it's or luck or random. And sometimes it is, but I feel like the more I hear about cancer, the more I'm thinking like, maybe we have agency. Maybe we can do something about it. And that's where I'd like to see more research on that. One of the other panelists there is it Dr. Shuji Ogino?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
He was there, and he studies the molecular level of cancer. And he made the point that these tumors, they take decades to develop and to show up, which means we have decades to fight it and to make sure it doesn't show up. So what are the things that we need to do to make sure cancer does show up? What if all of us can produce cancer, but many of us can stop it? So what is that? And we talked about the difficulty of doing that type of research. I think this was mentioned earlier, the difficulty of pediatric cancer. It's like, in order to prevent cancer, early onset cancer, you actually have to study at a very young age, and that's very difficult to do. But I would love to see more of that discussion, more of that research. I mean, is it alcohol? Is it, or how much alcohol contributes to higher incidence of breast cancer or colorectal cancer? Is it, how much is other parts of our diet, or how much of it is exercise? I know we kind of talk about it in kind of a new agey way, right? But maybe we should be studying it more seriously. Maybe there's other environmental reasons. And that panel made me think we can do something about it, and I feel like that's the next frontier. Like, how do we figure that out between early detection and between prevention?
Right. The holy grail is prevention for a lot of these things. Although colon cancer does have some preventative strategies, fortunately, like colonoscopy and removal of polyps. Although, of course, the young onset patients are often before the age where we're offering colonoscopies routinely outside of a strong family history. But lots of research going on there by Kimmy and others at the Dana-Farber in particular. I'm going to step back and ask you one final question before we need to close. You've been an extraordinarily powerful voice in reframing how we talk about cancer, especially publicly. As you continue to shape the conversation going forward in the years to come, How do you want that narrative to look?
I mean, for certain generations of us, we equate cancer with death, and I feel like we need to start changing that conversation. Yes, some people will die, but many more of us will live. And so how do we talk about cancer the way, and also because of the incredible research, I would love to see cancer be more of a chronic disease. I feel like when someone gets cancer, I shouldn't be scared, or not all of us should be scared to death. And that has been really hard. I think that's what my series, I think, exposed, that a lot of us are scared to death when we don't have to be. And maybe if we weren't scared to death, we would actually do more and talk more and take care of ourselves more, because we're not just so scared of cancer. And so that's what I really like, is to get us to talk about cancer, think about cancer, comfortable with it, and be really change how we think about it, And we can do that now because we've made so much advancement. I mean, this is a real sign of progress, that we cannot just be scared of cancer. We cannot just focus on treatment. It was great to hear Dr. Ebert talk about that you have a special unit just looking at early detection and early onset, not just early detection. So it's not just thinking about just treatment. And I promised to share this story about my 14-year-old son. When I was driving him back from violin lesson, and we're listening to the first episode, like a draft, of the final draft of the episode where you're in and I'm in, and we talk about my cancer diagnosis. And my son at the very end of listening to the episode says to me, "Mom, this is the stupidest idea for a podcast." And I said,
they keep you humble, don't they?
Yeah, and I said, "Why?" So, because you didn't die, and I was just thinking, I wasn't sure how to process that. I didn't say anything, but if you think about it, that's where we want to be, where my son knows his mom had cancer and he didn't immediately think she's going to die, And he just thought, so now I have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old. No, mom had cancer. She got treated at Dana-Farber. The doctors are really good, and she's moving on with her life. And for those of you who have cancer at my age, and I'm sure you hear this from patients a lot, is that when you're diagnosed at 45 and your kids are that young, all you can think about is, I want to see them grow up, and I want to dance at my son's wedding. And that's really the work that you all do. So I can dance. I can be at my son's high school graduation, college graduation, and see them and dance at their wedding. I mean, that's what it's all about.
Shirley, you're phenomenal.
Thank you.
Thank you on behalf of the whole audience and the Dana-Farber for being here and telling us your story and spreading the word and saying more.
Yes, yeah. Well, thank you for listening, all of you, and thank you, Dr. Partridge, for being my doctor. It's taking you 8 years to interview me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And one more round of applause for Shirley and for Anne. And Shirley, thank you so much for your vulnerability in coming here today to share your story. It was a beautiful reminder of why this work is so critical. So I hope all of you are leaving today feeling inspired by what your commitment and generosity has helped make possible. As we close this 2025 Presidential Symposium, I encourage you to join Dana-Farber leaders in the foyer for a reception and continued conversation. Those of you who signed up for a dinner with Dana-Farber faculty should have received an email, and your assigned dinner is on the back of your name tag. All dinners are located on the hotel's lower level. Staff is available to guide you, and locations are on the screens right here beside me. Should you have questions, please see the registration desk. So, thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful evening.